Right now, what we are going to go and discuss about is going to be about Pixar. Now, there isn't necessarily any major news that actually did come out of Pixar, other than the fact that the box office of Elemental has actually been doing some good progress. In fact, during this weekend, Elemental has officially surpassed The Flash in terms of the domestic box office. So if you wanted to have some good news, there you go. But what I want to go and discuss is actually regarding a topic that has been more and more popular that people have been discussing about, and especially throughout the week, I have oh, excuse me. Throughout the week, I have seen some people bringing up this topic, and a variety of takes would go and spew out all across social media. So I feel like might as well go and have a proper full discussion right over here, and that is regarding the current state of Pixar. Now, chances are you have probably seen some posts or some articles or even some YouTube videos that are similar to this, where the main topic that people have been discussing about again and again is the fact that Pixar seems to be struggling, that people have been panicking of the fact that because Elemental and even last year's Lightyear did not do well at the box office, people are just freaking out that they are in danger, that that people would be using several different words to describe the current state of Pixar, that like this article from Insider states here, that they are scrambling to win back its audience, or that they are in crisis, or that they are struggling, and all that kind of stuff. That people are panicking that Pixar can no longer make box office hits, and that they're dreading the future of Pixar, that there may be a possible near future that there may no longer be Pixar because it's no longer commercially viable and stuff like that. So we are seeing all this kind of mass hysteria that is going on in relation to Pixar. And honestly, this really is a case where the more that you look at it and the more that you actually go and think about what is currently happening with Pixar, I'm just going to go and say this right now. All of this is exaggeration. Like, this really is nothing more but sheer panic, and really nothing more but a cheap tactic from these journalists and YouTubers in order to get some quick clicks from reactionaries. And that's mainly that's mainly where you get the source of the panic. It's coming from reactionaries, like people who would think before they act, the kind of people who can only see just what's in front of their noses and never actually take the time to do their research and to actually see what's actually happening within Pixar. Are they really are in a problematic state right now? Now, I will go and state right now that yes, technically, they're not in great shape. They have been better, but that does not necessarily mean that things are going bad at Pixar. They're not in a dire situation where they're in a scrambled mess. Pixar is pretty much in a state where I guess you could say that, they have a little bit of a fever, they got a tiny bit of a cold, but everyone else is kind of reacting as if Pixar somehow has cancer and they don't have much time to live. That's always the big emergency that's somehow really going on. And let me just go and go note by note as to why is it that people would go and have many different arguments thinking that way, but in reality, it's not. Number one, it's regarding the box office and how they've not been doing great, and that technically Pixar released their second movie in a row in which was not doing well at the box office. Technically, it really started off with Lightyear, and then suddenly Elemental came out, and that one isn't necessarily doing so hot at the box office as well. Now, that is an argument that honestly I find to be absolutely ridiculous. And the thing that makes it so dumb is that there are many people out there who can only measure the success of a movie based on what they would do at the box office. Somehow the box office and the box office alone is the only measurement of the success of a movie and nothing else. Like, they wouldn't factor in any other aspect as to how a film would ultimately become popular, or for what a movie would have in terms of having like a very strong legacy. It's only through the box office. And that's why there are people out there who would have these bad takes thinking that, oh, well, Pixar is doing horribly because they never had a box office hit since Toy Story 4 back in 2019. Well, technically that is true, but that doesn't mean that the movies that they released afterwards were bombs. I mean, take a look at Soul, Luca, and Turning Red. Yes, they were not released they were not released in theaters. They didn't necessarily have an official theatrical release. But that does not necessarily mean that they are a failure. In fact, they were major successes on Disney Plus, even some of the most popular during that year, where they would rank up like billions of minutes or hours being viewed. And even Turning Red was the second most popular movie that people would watch on streaming, right under Encanto. And even Soul, that was also another massive hit, and it would go on to win an Oscar for Best Animated Feature. And not to mention how it was highly praised, and many people would say that it is one of Pixar's best movies ever. Not in recent years, like one of the best overall. So honestly, in that regard, there isn't, just because they weren't out on the box office, they weren't released in theaters and they didn't make much money at the box office, or even like little to none, that doesn't mean that Pixar had failure, that doesn't mean that it's been years since Pixar actually had a hit, because they did have a hit with the ones that were actually released on Disney Plus. I mean, with that kind of mentality, it's as, this is like the same mindset of people saying that The Mitchells vs. the Machines and Nimona were box office bombs, or they were absolute failures because they didn't make much money in the box office. It's that kind of like stupid and dumb mentality that people believe, that people are trying to push this narrative thinking that, oh, Disney is failing, Disney is not doing well, when in reality, they have been doing well because there are many other factors. In fact, let me give you another great example as to how Disney is actually doing pretty well, even with some of their other movies. Like, one film that I could say from this year actually made a lot of money is the Little Mermaid remake. Yes, I consider the Little Mermaid remake to be a massive hit. Now, I know technically true that if you do look at its box office alone, like, Disney would be at the point where they kind of broke even with The Little Mermaid. But the reason why I say that it is a massive hit and that Disney made tons of money on it is not because of the box office, but because of the merch. You have no idea how much merchandise that I have seen of The Little Mermaid. And I'm not necessarily talking about the Little Mermaid animated movie from 1989. I mean legit merchandise from the live action remake, like merchandise featuring the Halle Bailey version of Ariel. Like, it can legit be all over the place. And I've seen tons of people who would go and unironically purchase many of the clothing, the toys, all that kind of stuff. So I could guarantee you The Little Mermaid, yes, it is a massive hit. Maybe not necessarily through the box office, but through other means, absolutely. So honestly, the discussion about the box office doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. And I can guarantee you that even with Elemental right now, technically, it is still performing better than most other films that came out this summer, especially with the fact that it has longevity. Yes, it didn't have a great opening. In fact, it didn't have a good opening, but the fact that it is still lasting long at the box office and even surpassing many other feature films that came after it or even came during, like right now, Elemental is already having more momentum than Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And that really is saying something. And I'm predicting that honestly, that momentum could legitimately continue all throughout the month of July, or at the very least, it's gonna continue before TMNT Mutant Mayhem would go and come out. So honestly, this whole discussion about the box office is absolutely ridiculous because there are more ways that a movie can be successful, and Pixar has recently had success with Luca, with Soul, and with Turning Red. Which does bring me to my next discussion, and one argument that I honestly feel like it has really gone out of hand, and that is regarding Disney Plus. Because articles like this would go and mention that a big reason to blame to how Pixar is really struggling is because of how they would go and release some of their movies onto Disney Plus. That instead of releasing them in theaters, they've mistakenly put them onto Disney Plus during the pandemic, and now it is costing them dearly. Now, one thing I will say is that technically, yes, I do see how that argument may be true. Like, I could see where people are coming from with that, because there is actually a truth where because of the pandemic, people have been trained where if it's not a high priority to watch a movie in theaters, then they would just go and wait until the film would come out either digitally or on streaming. In fact, like, considering that Disney has done that practice, especially after Encanto, like that was a major one where technically that movie barely made much money at the box office. In fact, some people could say Encanto was a box office bomb, but then when that was released on Disney Plus a month later, then it became an absolute phenomenon. It became what is currently the latest animated success that Disney has. And in that regard, honestly, like, I can understand that, I can understand why that could be at fault here. But the way people are reacting, honestly, that's where it really got out of hand, where people are now saying like, oh, Disney shouldn't have released it. Disney shouldn't have done that whole Disney Plus strategy. They should have released it in theaters. I mean, are you forgetting that are you forgetting that there was a pandemic happening? And technically, some people could argue that we still have a pandemic right now. Like, COVID isn't really going anywhere. COVID is still a thing. So from there, like, honestly, like, let me ask you, like, if you didn't want to do like what Disney did with the Pixar movies, what else would you do? Like, you tell me, what would have been the other strategy? Just release them in theaters anyways? No, that would it would literally be a death sentence. Like, honestly, like, not many people were really willing to go and watch movies in theaters, not to mention that there have been several places, and I definitely can speak as someone living in the province of Quebec, where they would just close cinemas during the pandemic, like no access to the movie theater whatsoever. So you can't really go and do that because putting out a movie in theaters wasn't necessarily a viable option, especially if you want to go and try to make a movie profitable. You just cannot really do that, especially at the time. And not to mention that Pixar wasn't the only one doing this kind of strategy. Like, you got companies such as DreamWorks and Warner Brothers, where they would go and release their movies just directly onto digital. Like, they would just immediately put them out at home, just like what they would do with Trolls World Tour and with Scoob. And then you would have Sony Animation, who literally did the exact same thing, where they released a bunch of their movies on Netflix, and they even skipped out Hotel Transylvania Transformania. They promised to put it out in theaters, but instead they decided to say nope, and they would go and release it onto Amazon instead. So, I mean, everybody was trying to go and adapt. So honestly, like, and I can imagine that if they would go and actually put them out in theaters, then they would be box office flops regardless. It's the only viable way that they can go and actually keep business going. They can't just like hold it on to the side. Like, I know some people could argue like, well, that's what Illumination did, like with Minions Rise of Gru, but not everyone can actually go and do that. And especially with Pixar, they had a whole bunch of movies that were prepared, starting from 2020 and beyond. like they would have like, they got Onward, they got Soul, they got Luca, they got Turning Red, they got Lightyear, and they were simultaneously working on all those movies. And they had to plan out to go and release them one at a time, or even like twice a year. So it wasn't really a viable option to go and put it out in theaters. So honestly, in that regard, I understand the circumstance about how that can be a factor as to why the Pixar movies and even the Disney animation movies can be, that can be a reason as to why they're not performing well at the box office. But that doesn't mean that we should be scolding Disney for doing what they did, because it is a pandemic. I mean, I understand it was not a fun time, but that doesn't mean we should pretend that it doesn't exist, Like, that is still a significant factor. Disney had to do what they had to do because they didn't really have that much of a choice. But then there is another argument that, oh my God, among all of them, this has to be the worst of them all. And this is honestly the worst take that people are saying in terms of the problems with Pixar right now. And that is the fact that they don't have great leadership right now, that they legit miss John Lasseter. And even this insider article says that one of the reasons is that, and reading from my source here, they blame a focus on Disney Plus during the pandemic and a lack of tough love at Pixar since Chief Creative Officer John Lasseter's exit. Oof, man. Like, this is a big oof. What the fridge do you mean by tough love? Because, this is either very poor choice of words, or they know exactly what they are doing, and that what they find that the sexual harassment that John Lasseter was doing was no problem whatsoever. And it gets even worse when you really go down into it. Like, when they go and describe, in this article, they would go and they would state the situation that where is it? Okay, yeah. Now, in this paragraph over here, they do bring up a good point that one reason why Elemental wasn't a major box office smash was because of the marketing, that it wasn't necessarily marketed all that great and just focused on the love aspect and the whole and the whole novelty of the city itself and how we have all these different elements living amongst each other and stuff like that. I will say, there could have been better ways that you could have advertised Elemental in order to make it more appealing. That is definitely true. But then there is this take over here. However, several industry sources and some within Pixar believe the slump at the company goes beyond the bad marketing of Elemental. They said Pixar's troubles are because of the loss of his longtime leader, John Lasseter, who had a reputation for never settling and demanding excellence. Are you freaking kidding, man? It's just, are you saying it's because, Pixar should have never fired John Lasseter? Are you out of your freaking mind, dude? Number one, are you forgetting the way that John Lasseter has been treating his employees? Are you forgetting the way that John Lasseter would go and especially treat women? Are you saying that should be excusable? Are you saying that should be okay? Honestly, it's either you are so thick in the head that you are so smooth in the brain that you have either completely forgot that was a significant factor, or that you don't see any problem whatsoever with John Lasseter's actions, that you don't see it as anything wrong, that you are okay with what John Lasseter did, and that you yourself would want to do what John Lasseter would do in terms of his leadership. So already, that is massively questionable, that you're in a position that you really don't want to be in when you are defending John Lasseter that way. And on top of that, there's also one paragraph that I would say that they absolutely messed up, and that honestly is just completely dumb. It's right over here where they said, Pixar sources said the studio's current CCO, Soul Director, Pete Docter, lacks that intense drive for a higher quality of work that Lasseter possesses. That didn't help Lightyear, said Pixar source regarding Docter's kinder and gentler leadership, which they said resulted in the lackluster blockbuster. I don't think John would have ever let Lightyear happen. Okay, already, this is a bad take, and I would even go as far and say that this is objectively terrible. Like, just because someone is more, just because someone has a kinder and more gentler approach and is more empathetic towards their workers, that doesn't mean that they are inferior to the one that is tough. Like, honestly, I am starting to be sick and tired of seeing this entire mentality of nice guys finish last. No, that is not the case. And especially if that approach is not good, if you're saying that approach is not bad, then how is it that there are some movies in recent years from Pixar that they actually came out great? And in fact, I would even say that they came out with the Pixar standard of quality, like Soul or Luca or Turning Red. I mean, those movies are fantastic. I would say that they are on par with what the other Pixar films have done, and they would have Pete Docter's new approach. And again, they did turn out to be massive successes on Disney Plus. So honestly, that argument feels absolutely invalid right there. And also there is the other argument in terms of, oh, John would have never let Lightyear happen. I'm just going to say this. You know that John Lasseter literally did make Lightyear happen, right? Because one of the last things that he has actually done before he was kicked out of Disney entirely was that he actually greenlit Lightyear. Now, I know that John didn't necessarily, he didn't necessarily got involved with the entire production whatsoever, but he literally is the man who let Lightyear happen. So honestly, this is just very poor choice of words here. It's honestly, it's honestly stupid. Just to go and say that, like, well, he didn't let Lightyear happen. Yes, he did. He put on the okay to actually make Lightyear exist. And not to mention, here's another thing that I find completely dumb with this, and this honestly goes into the whole argument with the whole Pixar is struggling thing, is that you know that we've been having this discussion for many years, right? Like, this isn't anything new. This isn't anything that's just recently happening because of Lightyear or anything like that. Because we have been saying this ever since the 2010s. Maybe you remember back a decade ago when this has been a discussion that people have been saying again and again, that Pixar has been losing their touch. Pixar has been struggling. Oh, Pixar isn't what they used to be and all that kind of stuff. Where they would go and keep on complaining that the movies that they were releasing, they're not on par to what they were releasing in the 2010s. That they're not, that they weren't like major box office hits, or that they would go and release more sequels than they would original content. The fact that throughout the 2010s, Pixar put out more sequels than they actually did with original IPs like Coco, Inside Out, The Good Dinosaur, Brave, and what else was there? Brave, Inside Out, Good Dinosaur, Coco. Is that it? Oh, fudge, that may be it. Maybe I'm missing one, but you do get what I mean. And also, like, going back into the box office, how the Pixar name is not always a guarantee to make money. Of the fact that The Good Dinosaur became a massive box office bomb. So from there, like, we're all having those same discussions that we've had before. And I mean, those discussions during the 2010s, that was when John Lasseter was there. And I mean, I want to know, for those John Lasseter defenders, can you go and actually explain why is it that The Good Dinosaur became a box office bomb despite John Lasseter's leadership? Like, so, the thing is, bringing back John Lasseter isn't, it's not going to solve your problems. In fact, it may end up adding more issues. And honestly, there is one argument that I do want to say is the one thing that really It's the true killer. The one thing why you should never bring back John Lasseter, and why John Lasseter is not the solution to go and save Pixar. Have y'all seen Luck? Have any of you actually seen that movie that they released on Apple TV Plus? The one that is supposed to be John Lasseter's great return? Because I can guarantee you, that movie is absolute crap. Now, granted, technically I would say that it's more mediocre at best, because it does supply great animation. The team at Skydance Animation actually did do a great job with the visuals. But then again, when it comes to the actual writing, that turned out to be a disaster. And yes, it is all John Lasseter's fault, where they took a very promising concept and then John came in and fired some people and really messed around with the story to make it more his image. And as a result, it turned out to be this massive failure that was desperately trying to be like Disney, but it wasn't. And honestly, and I'll even say that if you would go and release Luck onto theaters, it's a guaranteed box office bomb. I can for sure tell you that it would be an absolute flop, and even if you attach the Pixar name, it would make Pixar look even worse. So in that regard, there is literally no reason as to why you would want to go and bring John Lasseter back, or that it was or that no, it is not a mistake for Pixar or Disney to go and fire John Lasseter. It is an objectively terrible reason, and again, I still stand by that John Lasseter has no right to go and keep on working as a leader in the animation industry. That dude should honestly retire. And I have no faith and I have no hopes for that next movie they're putting out, Spellbound or whatever. Like, I know that they brought in Alan Menken to go and do the songs and stuff like that, but still though, from what I've seen based on Luck and the fact that they're still enabling the toxic leadership of John Lasseter, it's already a dead cause right over there. So honestly, I'm not even bothering to play with Spellbound and give it the hope that, oh, maybe it could turn out to be good. Like, no. But yeah, so overall, this is just to go and say that Pixar is in a much better position than what many people are thinking. That if you go and take a step back, and if you actually do, unlike what these people, like these article writers here, or any of those YouTubers trying to say that Pixar is in a crisis or whatever, in reality, Pixar is gonna be okay. Pixar is actually doing fine. And even though they are in a bit of a downtime, that doesn't mean that they cannot climb their way back up. There will, and I can guarantee you, there will be a moment where Pixar will suddenly find their popularity back, where they will suddenly find their groove back. It's just right now, we're just seeing reactionaries just panicking over nothing. Like, they got a serious bad case of Chicken Little syndrome, where an acorn fell on their head, and now they're just screaming, they're just screaming that the sky is falling. Now, I'm going to go and take a little bit of a break right now, but when I do return, I want to know what you all think. I want to pass the microphone on to you, and I want to ask, what do you think about the current state of Pixar? And do you think it's actually bad, or do you think that they're going to be okay? Let me know what you think after these messages. All right, we are back. So now that I have said my piece about what's going on with Pixar and that how they are actually doing better than what many people on the internet think, I want to ask the chat wall, what do you all think about Pixar's current state? Let's see what we got here. Well, let's see now. How apropos, a Pixar movie about fire and water that started out with dampened expectations is having a slow burn towards success. As someone who has seen Elemental 4 times, and I am planning to watch it non-stop on Disney+, this pleases me, especially because, like you said, the reactionary Disney haters are being proven wrong once again. I'm looking forward to Encanto Elemental being sorry, let me rephrase that. I'm looking forward to Elemental becoming Pixar's Encanto. Also, screw John Lasseter. I think people only like Luck because of waifu trash Sam Greenfield. I mean, like, yeah, like, technically she is an attractive character, but really, it's just her looks. I mean, already, I completely forgot about, like, the other aspects about Sam, honestly. Like, it is, like, the writing is such trash, and like whatever, like, if there are good things about it, I've already forgotten about it. I mean, it's a movie that's not even worth remembering anyways. And I mean, I can guarantee you that those John Lasseter defenders, like 99.9% of those people, have not seen Luck whatsoever. They have not seen the movie, and that if they have, then there's a good chance that they'll see it and like, oh, maybe it's not a great idea to bring him back to Pixar. Oh, never mind. Oh, let's see what we got here. In my opinion, I don't even trust I don't even trust John Lasseter anymore. Sure, he has made a lot of great films for Pixar and Disney Animation that were adored by people, but but the way that he treats the female employees, that's his downfall. I trust Pete Docter on giving animators and filmmakers any creative freedom as long as they don't fall in the Disney's 2000s era. I mean, technically you could say that right now Pixar is kind of in their 2000s era, but with how we are seeing with Elemental and how we are seeing a bit of a, like, how Elemental is slowly but surely having a tiny bit of a comeback, there is a strong possibility that we could be the end of that dark time for Pixar, and that whatever they're going to come out later, like with Elio or Inside Out 2, we could see a little bit of a pick-me-up. We could see a little bit of a return, that now things are going to go uphill for Pixar. And not to mention, I just want to go and quickly add that you cannot go and complain what Disney and Pixar is doing right now and want to bring back John Lasseter, considering that John Lasseter is the guy who is responsible for many of the things that people are complaining about Disney, especially when it comes to enabling sequels, like making both Disney Animation and Pixar to do a whole bunch of sequels, or have Disney Animation start to do sequels with Ralph Breaks the Internet and Frozen 2. Like, you cannot be a John Lasseter supporter and a hater of Ralph Breaks the Internet at the same time. I'm just saying. Let's see. While I have my doubts Elemental will reach Coco levels, it is doing really well. Something I attribute to good word of mouth. So in a way, I don't think Pixar is going anywhere. Also, the John Lasseter thing is just entirely stupid, especially with how Luck turned out. Now, if you excuse me, I need to hop off for a sec. I'm still distracted by that little discovery in the last story. Oh my god. Like, are we still in Simp Town here, folks? All right, anyways, I think we can agree that the pandemic was not really kind to Pixar ever since we entered the 2020 decade, and why we are having a discussion of the so-called what's ruining Pixar right now. Yes, Lightyear and even Elemental didn't do good at the box office, but they are not in ruin right now, as audiences are slow to return to their films. Plus, their quality of films hasn't changed thanks to films like Soul. Therefore, Pixar is still the same as we know, despite the ups and downs with their sequels. Exactly. Again, if you take a step back and actually see the big picture with what's been happening with Pixar, especially even before the pandemic and stuff like that, then really Pixar is doing fine. There's not a whole lot that has really changed. Yes, the pandemic did affect Pixar financially when it comes to the box office results, but that doesn't mean that Pixar is in critical danger or anything like that. So really, it's just exaggeration coming from the Disney haters. And especially, it is worth noting how, like, nowadays, like, the Disney hate has really become popular, especially amongst the Republican crowd, where they would keep labeling Disney as, like, woke and stuff like that, and keep spreading that lie of go woke, go broke, or whatever. So in that regard, like, a lot of it is just trying to push an agenda or trying to push a narrative that isn't actually there. It's either like completely fabricated or just really twisting the truth to make it more exaggerated than what it actually seems. Let's see what else we have. This article really made me boil my blood out of anger, and also my own anger went up to 11 after reading it Inside Out style. Why is this insider writer defending a problematic person and attacking Pete Docter? Pete Docter is the reason why Pixar is getting back into making original films right now. He's listening to newcomers and encouraging many people, including myself, to keep doing our best. He's one of the nicest people I've ever met. F Insider. Yeah, exactly. It's just, yeah, it honestly feels so dumb that they want to go and really push that narrative like, oh, this person is kind, he's empathetic. That's wrong. You shouldn't do that. You need to be mean. You need to be tough. You need to be attacking your people. Like, it's honestly, like, I feel like this person really got the wrong message when he read about that Vulture article regarding the making of Spider-Verse and how Phil Lord and Chris Miller were absolutely toxic to their employees. And that person, for some reason, got the mindset of, oh, in order to make good movies, you have to torture animators. Like, really got that wrong message right there. Let's see. I'll read one more comment before we go and move on to the next story and have another break. While I will admit Pixar did suffer because of the pandemic, Pixar is far from being doomed. They still managed to find major success with Disney Plus, and they are still making quality animated films. And they are especially doing so much better without John Lasseter, so overall, Pixar is absolutely stable. Also, right now, I still find it hilarious that Elemental is doing better than The Flash right now, and that is an accomplishment and so satisfying. Oh yeah, honestly, I cannot wait for the day that Elemental makes more money worldwide at the box office than The Flash. That's definitely going to be something I want to go and cover on this podcast. It could be possible it'll happen next week after the weekend, but we will see on that.